that there is something more than economic going on here. There is something more than just the tariff negotiations falling through that are going on here. There is something deeply personal that is going on. Certainly with the language that Trump seems to be employing for a country which is a strategic partner, a country that started negotiations early off the blocks, and importantly was considered to be the counterweight or the bulwark to China. The question before India is, should India take Trump's bait, be seen as reacting angrily to him, responding to him in a public fashion, or should there be a more quiet fortitude about how we deal with these tariffs? The markets seem to be showing the way. The markets initially began in the red, but eventually ended the day in the green slightly. And that is one indication that the markets have perhaps factored in the Trump tariffs. The bigger question also is this: how does India navigate this whole... It's really turning out to be a Trump tariff tantrum. And we're going to see more of this over the next few weeks and months. So how does India navigate this tricky terrain, as it were? The Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal today made a statement in both houses of Parliament. He said that India will always protect the interests of its farmers, of small and medium enterprises, MSMEs, and that India is still hopeful of a deal, an interim deal by the fall, which is going to be sometime in October or November, whenever India hosts the Quad Summit later this year, which Trump is expected to attend. So they're still hopeful of clinching a deal. But you have to deal with these tantrums and this noise coming from the White House over the next few weeks and months. India is certainly, at least publicly, standing its ground, saying it has to protect its interests, small farmers and small industry. But at the same time, you also have to find a way to do business with the biggest economy in the world. But first, let's play out some back and forth that's been happening, what Trump said while he announced the 25% tariff on India, and of course, how this has put paid in many ways to expectations that India would be one of the first countries to clinch an interim deal.
Well, we're negotiating right now, and it's also BRICS. You know, they have BRICS, which is basically a group of countries that are anti the United States, and India is a member of that, if you can believe it. It's an attack on the dollar, and we're not going to let anybody attack the dollar. So it's partially BRICS, and it's partially the trade, this trade situation. It's the deficit. We had a tremendous deficit. So, as you know, Prime Minister Modi's a friend of mine, but they don't do very much business in terms of business with us. They sell a lot to us, but we don't buy from them. You know why? Because the tariff is so high. They have one of the highest tariffs in the world. Now, they're willing to cut it very substantially, but we'll see what happens. We're talking to India now. We'll see what happens. It doesn't matter too much whether we have a deal or whether we charge them a certain tariff, but you'll know at the end of this week.
Now, a 25% tariff for India is just 1 percentage point lower than what President Trump had threatened back in April when he announced his reciprocal tariffs. It is also significantly higher than what Trump is tariffing some other Asian countries, whether it's Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, etc. South Korea, which has become the latest country to crack a deal with the United States, will get 15% tariffs. So you have countries that are on the lower end of the tariff bracket, like the European Union, South Korea, Japan at 15%. And then you have countries like Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, which are in the 19-20% range. Japan, like I said, has been tariffed at 15%. So it's essentially these countries are being tariffed between 15 to 20%. That's broadly where the tariffs are. India, on the other hand, is being tariffed at much higher at 25%. The European Union, which is a bloc of 27 countries, just reached a deal earlier this week, and we'll have a deep dive on that a little later on in the show. They just reached a deal on Sunday between Trump and Ursula von der Leyen, who is the European Commissioner, where the EU, the 27-member trading bloc, will now face 15% tariffs. The only country which has lower than 15% tariffs happens to be the UK, but the UK and the United States don't trade as much. Like India and the US, for example, last year was $120 billion. That's a lot of trade. The US and China are the two biggest trading partners for India. So how does India navigate this tricky terrain? One is the tariff part. The other seems to be these taunts and tantrums and almost personal-like insults that the president seems to be making. So what about these measures? These tariff measures of 25% will kick in on Friday, which is the 1st of August. Which are the sectors that are likely to be impacted because of this? For example, textiles. India exports a lot of textiles to the US. Almost a third of India's textile exports are to the United States. So that's going to be one sector that will be impacted. The latest tariffs will be particularly bad on cotton as well as garment exports. There will also be a major price disadvantage because if Vietnam is producing at 20% and Indonesia and Philippines are producing at 19% and India at 25%, then there is a significant tariff differential, which of course will not be helpful for Indian small manufacturers and small textile exporters. There's chemicals and ceramics, which could also see some of their higher margins eroded. And these tariffs could have a big impact, particularly on the smaller companies. Automobile components are another sector that could be affected. India exported more than $2 billion worth of auto parts to the United States in the fiscal year 24, again accounting for almost 30% of all the total auto parts exports that India has been making to any country in the world. So an increase in tariffs there again would likely translate into higher costs. That would impact supply chains, that would impact profit margins, and ultimately it would impact the business itself. Electronics exports could also see an uncertain outlook. India has emerged as the leading supplier of smartphones to the United States. In fact, in the last quarter, India surpassed China in terms of its smartphone exports to the US market, but that could be in jeopardy after these tariffs. As far as China is concerned, he's given another extension by another 3 months or so, and the buzz is that America and China might clinch a deal somewhere close to September, October, when Trump is expected to go to Beijing for the APEC summit. The newly imposed tariffs has raised serious concerns also on the exports of gems and jewelry. Indian exports to the US in this sector were about $10 billion or so in the last financial year. Trump has threatened an additional 200% on pharmaceuticals as well. He's not announced that, but that again, generic drugs are a big export commodity for India going into the US. Though there is no definitive date as when these pharmaceutical tariffs will kick in, that could again be a big problem given that America happens to be India's largest overseas pharma market and exports rose more than 20% in FY25.
वाणिज्य एवं उद्योग मंत्रालय निर्यातकों और उद्योग सहित सभी हितधारकों से संवाद कर इस विषय पर उनके आकलन की जानकारी ले रहा है। हम अपने रिफॉर्म्स और अपने किसानों, एमएसएमई और उद्यमियों की कड़ी मेहनत के बल पर 11वीं सबसे बड़ी अर्थव्यवस्था से शीर्ष 5 अर्थव्यवस्थाओं में से एक बन गए हैं। हम अपने राष्ट्रीय हितों को सुरक्षित करने और आगे बढ़ाने के लिए सभी आवश्यक कदम उठाएंगे। भारत फ्रैजाइल 5 अर्थव्यवस्थाओं में से निकलकर दुनिया की सबसे तेजी से बढ़ती प्रमुख अर्थव्यवस्था बन गया है। भारत वैश्विक विकास में लगभग 16% का योगदान दे रहा है।
All right, I want to go across to Professor Steve Hanker. He's an economist and professor of applied economics at the Johns Hopkins University. Thank you very much, Professor Hanker, for speaking with us. Donald Trump has just announced the 25% tariffs on Indian exports into the United States. It is much higher than what it is for the European Union or Japan or even South Korea. Those countries are being tariffed at 15%. India is a good 10% higher than that. Also higher than some of the Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam and Philippines. How do you see this, number one? Number two, how does India reconcile with this? Because India was one of the first countries to start talking with Trump, to have trade negotiations with the Trump team. And for the longest time, India was certainly hoping that it'll be able to cut a deal with Trump. But unfortunately, that has not come to pass. So how do you view it and how does India reconcile with this?
Well, the thing to realize is that these so-called deals that Trump is doing with regard to tariffs and trade are not really deals. They're just oral agreements. They're not even in writing. There's no text. It's all very unprofessional and almost unique. They're really portrayed as being great in the United States, but I think they're really just pie in the sky, because whatever they are, Trump reserves the right to change whatever the terms are, since nothing's really in writing. So I think success is in the eye of the beholder. I think the only thing we know for certain is that American consumers will be paying a large sales tax on everything they import, including importation of goods and services from India.
Okay.
That's the only thing we know in principle is that a sales tax is being imposed on Americans for all the goods that they import, and that's bad.
But Professor Hanker, we're not seeing the effects of that either in U.S. consumer sentiment or in U.S. manufacturing activity. We're not seeing that in the stock markets in the U.S. certainly. And whatever data the Treasury Department has put out, again, this has been shared by major and mainstream American media reports. The Treasury Department, I think a couple of days ago, put out a paper suggesting that in the first 6 months of Mr. Trump's term in office, the U.S. government has collected somewhere in the range of $150 billion in these tariffs. So the market seems to be welcoming these tariffs. How do you view that? How do you explain that to start with?
Well, I explain it. It's obvious. They're imposing a sales tax on imports, so that revenue goes to the U.S. Treasury. And Trump is beating the drums. Oh, this is just wonderful. No, it's a disaster for the U.S. consumer, because where do you think the money comes from? They advertise it as if the money will come from Indians or Europeans. No, it's paid for by the importer who imports the goods into the United States. That means Americans pay the tax, and that tax goes to the government.
Okay.
I think the markets are basically in a speculative frenzy anyway in the United States, and no matter what happens, the markets go up. In a speculative frenzy, the markets go up. Just look at Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is a speculative asset. It has no fundamental value, and it just goes up, 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 up. Well, that bubble will pop someday. We don't know when. And by the way,
But
my market bubble detector in the United States is at a very high level. It's in bubble territory, meaning that there's a bubble in the U.S.
okay.
That means the market is overhyped, overpriced, and overbought.
So
And eventually, either one of two things will happen when you're in a bubble.
all right,
Either-
Mr. Hankey, one second. More than the markets, what I want to know is how do countries like India, for example, navigate this? Because, look, the logic, whatever little there was to the idea of tariffs, was that partner countries, ally countries like Japan and South Korea, and partner countries like India would have a tariff differential vis-a-vis China, because ultimately the big objective was that China, which is the biggest manufacturing country in the world and with whom America runs the largest trade deficit, will eventually have to pay much higher, and therefore there will be a disincentive for more and more Chinese exports into the United States. It will help countries like India, Japan, South Korea. But that doesn't seem to be playing out the way some of these countries were hoping.
Well, for one thing, let me be clear about one thing. The foreigners are not creating the trade deficit that Trump worries about because of their nefarious activities and manipulating exchange rates and all those kinds of things. The trade deficits are created by Americans because Americans, since 1975, have spent more than the GDP generated in the United States, and that gap is filled by importation and a trade deficit that exists. And by the way, it's been a good deal for Americans because it's easy for America to finance it because the U.S. dollar is the international currency. We have a very easy way to finance the trade deficits and attract the capital inflows that are required to counterbalance the deficits. So
All right.
the
Mr.
idea
Hanker,
that
thank you.
somehow-
Thank you for joining us. That's Professor Steve Hanker from the Johns Hopkins University School of Applied Economics, saying that tariffs overall are a disaster, more so for the American economy. There might be some temporary pain for exporter countries like India into the U.S., but ultimately it's going to be the American consumer who is going to have to bear the brunt of these tariffs. We'll wait and see how that plays out. But whatever President Trump has been throwing, it's not just the 25% tariff, but also a whole bunch of insults, really. Because if you look at his Truth Social posts over the last 12 hours or so, in his words, he has called India a dead economy, which is not just, factually incorrect, but more importantly, it is downright insulting. He's also said both Indian economy and Russian economy are dead economies. He's called India Russia's biggest energy buddy. Here in Delhi, the Ministry of Commerce has responded with a quintessential diplomatic statement saying that they're analyzing the implications. That was a statement put out yesterday by the PIB. Today, the minister responded in Parliament by saying that India will protect its farmers and its MSMEs. India's commitment is to fair and balanced trade, and eventually it has to be mutually beneficial trade. It can't be a lopsided deal where only one country walks away with all the benefits. But the opposition was up in arms. Rahul Gandhi today, in fact, agreed with Trump, said that Trump is right, that India is a dead economy and that Mr. Modi has killed the economy. Now, while Rahul Gandhi echoes this rather harsh critique of President Trump on India's economy, calling it a dead economy, some within his party are contradicting him, perhaps even openly. Congress leader Rajiv Shukla, for example, he's pushed back against the idea of India's economy being a dead economy, calling his characterization inaccurate. Rajiv Shukla emphasized that India's economy continues to demonstrate resilience amidst global challenges. Shashi Tharoor, not really the most favorite in the Congress stable these days, but he has been echoing a nation-first stand as well. He's urged India to firmly resist what he calls unfair trade demands from the United States. Tharoor has also emphasized that India should prioritize its national interests and be prepared to walk away from these negotiations if the terms do not support a fair and balanced trade partnership. Manish Tiwari described Trump's comments as unintended tribute to India's exceptionalism and to India's strategic autonomy. But Rahul Gandhi will have none of it. He says, yes, Trump is right in calling India's economy a dead economy.
Everybody knows that the Indian economy is a dead economy. I'm glad that President Trump has stated a fact.
जो सरकार लगातार पिछले 11 वर्षों से दोस्ती के बाद दोस्ती और कितनी दोस्ती बढ़ाई कि आज हमें क्या दिन देखने को पड़ रहे हैं, ये शुरुआत है बुरे दिनों की.
I want to shift focus now to another big story that happened today. In 2008, a blast ripped through Bikku Chowk in Malegaon during Ramzan and killed 6 and injured 100. One of the most politically and communally sensitive terror investigations in the country reached its final chapter today. A special NIA court in Mumbai acquitted all 7 accused, including former BJP MP Pragya Singh Thakur and Lieutenant Colonel Prasad Purohit of the Indian Army. The court said there was a lack of concrete evidence and there were procedural lapses. The court also acknowledged the tragedy and ordered compensation of 2 lakh rupees to the families of the deceased and 50,000 to the injured to be paid by the government. The NIA court found major lapses in the investigation, which was carried out by the NIA, by the ATS, the local crime branch in Nashik and in Azad Nagar. The court found a lack of conclusive evidence. It said that the prosecution failed to prove that the accused conspired or executed the Malegaon Blast. The court also noted that there was no credible evidence proving that Pragya Thakur owned the motorcycle that was used to carry out the blast. The court also said that although there are allegations that RDX was used to cause the explosion, there is simply no evidence that RDX was stored at Colonel Purohit's residence, and neither is there any proof that he assembled the bomb in the first place. The court also said that both the sanction orders of the UAPA in the case are defective. Moreover, the NIA court also found discrepancies in the list of injured. The court has come to the conclusion that the injured people were not 101 but 95, and there was manipulation in the number of injured. The NIA court found that the evidence collection process was compromised because crucial documents like the Panchnama, that is the official record of the site, were flawed or incomplete. Additionally, important sketches that map out the blast site were also missing. The court cited that key witnesses had retracted their statements. Nearly 37 witnesses turned hostile. The court even highlights that the alleged meetings in Bhopal and in Faridabad were not substantiated, and there was no concrete evidence to prove the same.
I am extremely grateful to the country and all those who stood by me and by us. I am grateful to the judiciary for understanding the case and delivering justice to all of us. I only will say that during all this fight, all my friends, my colleagues, especially the armed forces, my army, the way they stood by me, I have no words to express my gratitude towards all of them.
ये भगवा को आतंकवाद करने की साजिश थी। एक तरह से भगवा की जीत हुई है, भगवा की विजय हुई है। ये फैसला है, न्याय नहीं है। ये न्याय नहीं है जब तक जो दोषी है इसके, जो इन्होंने केस को फ्रेम किया है, जब तक वो कन्फर्म नहीं आएंगे तब तक न्याय नहीं माना जाएगा।
हम तो पहले दिन से जानते थे कि हम निर्दोष हैं। न्यायालय ने आज इस पर मुहर लगा दी है। कोई भी इस बात को मानने को तैयार नहीं था कि हिंदू भी आतंकवादी हो सकता है। आज जो हमारे ऊपर ये कालिख पोती गई थी वो आज धुल गई है।
I want to go across to JP Mishra, is the lawyer of Sadhvi Pragya Thakur. Mr. Mishra, how do you see this verdict, particularly some of the scathing observations made by the made against the investigating agencies? This trial has been going on for 17 years. Your client, Sadhvi Pragya, has suffered torture, physical torture, as well as mental torture, as she has claimed. Do you think these 17 years have been unjust to her and to her name?
Investigating agencies were not honest in collecting the evidence. Instead of collecting the evidence, investigating agency created the evidence at the helm of the government at that time. In the year 2009, there was going to be the parliament election, and therefore, prior to that, several bomb visports, several terrorist acts has been committed, and some particular community persons were being arrested. And therefore, in the Jaipur aggression of Congress leaders announced that there is also a Bhagwa Atangwad, Hindu Atangwad. You will see thereafter in some Jota place, Ajmer Blast, Malegaon Blast, etc. Hindus were arrested. And I will explain you by several incidents and several facts that it is a creation of evidence rather than collection of evidence. After 17 years it has happened so. First of all, 12 accused were arrested, but there was not a single charge sheet against any one of the accused. And the government or investigating agency wanted to invoke the provisions of MCOC Act, MAPOCA, to keep them in custody for long period. As there was no any single charge sheet, previous charge sheet against any of the accused, Rakesh Thavde, a person of Pune, was arrested on 2nd of November 2008.
Okay.
He was arrested on 11th of November in a Parbhani 2003 case. There was a bomb blast in Parbhani in 2003. In 2004, there was a bomb blast in Jalna. So Rakesh Thavde was arrested in Parbhani case on 11th, and charge sheet was filed on 13th of November. Rakesh Thavde was arrested on 15th of November in Jalna case, and charge sheet was filed on the very date. And on the basis of those two charge sheets, MCOC Act was invoked against all the accused. But the then case was transferred from Pune CGM court to MCOC court Mumbai.
Okay.
Justice Janar Sindhe discharged the accused on the ground that these two charge sheets are after the arrest of the accused. It is not the previous charge sheet.
Okay. So, would you now take this forward legally, because your client has been suffering for 17 years? The ATS has been particularly, not looked down kindly upon by the court today. In fact, they've accused, the judgment has actually said that the ATS is accused of planting evidence.
See, as I understand, the Honorable Court has also, for the first time, has also asked the concerned government or the concerned department to inquire into the acts of the officers who have created false evidence. You can see against the accused Manu Pragya Singh, the court has just several points I will point out. About the ownerships of the LM Freedom motorcycle. The prosecution failed to prove the ownership. That Sadhvi Pragya Singh was the owner of the motorcycle which was found at the place of the incident. The prosecution failed to prove that she was in possession at the material time or she was having control over the vehicle. The prosecution failed to prove that who had parked the vehicle at the place of incident. The prosecution failed to prove that how the conspiracy taken place and whether Pragya Singh and other accused participated in that and what was discussed in the conspiracy meeting. Prosecution failed to prove that Colonel Purohit brought the RDX from Kashmir. Prosecution failed to prove that Abhinav Bharat collected the money and given to some person and that money was used for terrorist act. UAPA sanction is totally absurd. It is not a legal sanction. Chitkala Jutsi was the Home Secretary at the material time. Sanctioning authority has to give the sanction after application of his own mind independently. But in the court, Home Secretary Chitkala Jutsi had deposed before the court on oath. The ATS gave the document. Under Secretary prepared the note. Under Secretary forwarded the note to Deputy Secretary. Deputy Secretary prepared the note and forwarded to the NLJ Department, Law and Judiciary. Law and Judiciary Department prepared the note and forwarded to her, and she categorically admitted she granted sanction on the basis of those notes.
All right, Mr. Mishra, we'll leave it at
Further
that.
proceeding.
Hopefully, because it's been taken 17 years of mental and physical toll on your client and all the other accused. They've been acquitted now. Thank you very much for joining us. That's JP Mishra, the lawyer of Sadhvi Pragya Thakur. Now, we've started a special series this week here on CNN News 18, and we want to double down on this because this is an issue that resonates with you, the viewer. Despite massive infrastructure budgets across major cities, Delhi, Mumbai, Bengaluru, the ground reality is this. This is what we're seeing in city after city, and it's been exacerbated because of the ongoing monsoon season. Across the National Capital Region, for example, heavy rains over the last couple of days have brought traffic to a complete standstill today. I mean, getting from Delhi to Gurgaon was a complete nightmare. It was the stuff of complete downright nightmares today. It caused widespread waterlogging. In fact, an underpass in Ghaziabad, again in the National Capital Region, was flooded. It crippled movement along the entire national highway there. Even more concerning, there was a basement in a private housing society that collapsed because of the pressure of rainwater, and it damaged multiple vehicles there, including a Mercedes-Benz car, by the way, which suffered extensive damage because of the waterlogging. The owner of that car, and we're showing that car, it's been towed away. The owner of that car has now sent a legal notice to the civic body there seeking 5 lakh rupees in compensation, saying it's because of bad water management by the municipal corporation there that he had to give up on a 40 lakh car or a 50 lakh car. In East Delhi, for example, garbage collection has been a huge problem for a number of years now. Now that garbage has choked up drains, as a result of which there is, sewage-filled water overflow that happens with every spell of rain that turns roads into dangerous traps. The question remains, it's Delhi, Mumbai, Bengaluru. If we are truly making smart cities out of our cities, if we are truly transforming urban India, then why do we have to put up with this nonsense every year, year after year, every monsoon season? Or are citizens now left to fend for themselves, particularly in urban centers, which pay the highest taxes in this country? CNN News 18 is campaigning for this urban resident because you, the taxpayer, we, the taxpayer, we deserve better than what we're getting in the name of public infrastructure, in the name of urban infrastructure. But take a look at what parts of the national capital had to endure in the last 24 hours or so. Today it's Delhi, tomorrow we'll do Mumbai, and then Kolkata, then Bengaluru. Any city, you name it, the situation is the same. The degrees might be varying, but ultimately it's first world taxes and third world infrastructure in urban India. Let's bring you some ground reports.
It's the monsoon season out here in the national capital. Over the past many years, we have seen that each and every time when the monsoon arrives, the infrastructure, the civic infrastructure of Delhi actually crumbles. This time around as well, though there have been some improvement that has been seen on the ground, but yes, civic apathies and civil infrastructure seems to be crumbling out here in the national capital. Currently, I'm reporting from the Patparganj area in the national capital, one of the posh locations in the East Delhi districts. And over here as well, I'll just move out of the frame to show you in the visuals over here that the civic apathy and the amount of garbage that still continues to be thrown on the road continues to remain the same. Although there has been some improvement that has been seen, the clearing work that is done by the MCD and the local administration can be seen happening on the ground. But the question is it happening at the right pace? Is it happening in the right speed? And the answer to that is no. Yes, there has been improvement that has been seen, but over here as well, the kind of preparedness that should have happened before the monsoon would have arrived in the national capital, that preparedness was seemed to be lacking this time around as well. And that is the reason why you are seeing these visuals on your screen right on the NH24 highway that connects Delhi to Uttar Pradesh, specifically to places like districts like Meerut as well. This road that leads towards Meerut, you can see the kind of situation that is over here. The drains are clogged, the drains are not running. The garbage that is on the road, that has blocked the entry of water into these drains, and that eventually results in waterlogging as well.
Waterlogging on one side of the road and huge leap of garbage on the other. Currently we are in the Sudamapuri area of Ghaziabad, and this is the city which has scored 100% in the market and residential area for cleanliness, and this is the current condition of the city. As you can see that the ground realities are speaking about something else. There's waterlogging, and after last night's rain, the entire powerhouse which you can see is on the other side of the road. The entire powerhouse has been submerged in the water. Currently in the city and currently in this area there is no electricity, and people are suffering from it. People have complained several times. However, the authorities are trying their best to make sure that they bring a solution for the area and completely clean the area, because currently all the residents who are here are complaining about it. Not just the waterlogging, but on the other side, if you see, there's garbage which has been collected. Now, Ghaziabad is a city which is wanting to become that smart city and to have a residential area which is clean and not full with garbage and water. But the ground realities are something else. As you can see the visuals, the entire city is suffering from waterlogging and from huge leap of garbage. We have spoken to people also, and one thing that they are saying is that where are the authorities? Where is the city that they were supposed to have? Because the infrastructure, the roads and the garbage is completely giving another picture of what was expected out of the city, what was expected out of the government. The condition remains the same, and the questions of the people are still there, that when we'll get a clean city, and only one demand, that save our city.
गुरुग्राम में सुबह से हो रही बारिश के बाद जगह जगह जल भराव हो गया है और साथ ही लंबा जाम इस वक्त हाईवे के ऊपर लग चुका है। इस वक्त मैं मौजूद हूँ राजू चौक के पास, और यहाँ आप तस्वीरों में देख पाएंगे कि ये जो गाड़ियाँ आ रही हैं ये दिल्ली की तरफ से आ रही हैं और मानेसर की तरफ ये गाड़ियाँ जा रही हैं, यानी कि जयपुर की तरफ ये गाड़ियाँ जा रही हैं। और आप जाम देख सकते हैं कि किस कदर ये जाम लगा हुआ है। हाईवे के ऊपर भी बारिश का पानी आ गया है और यही एक वजह है कि लगातार यहाँ पर जाम जो है वो लगा हुआ है। कई किलोमीटर लंबा ये जाम इस वक्त लग चुका है। जो नरसिंहपुर का जो एरिया है नेशनल हाईवे के ऊपर, जो कि जयपुर जाने वाली तरफ है, वहाँ पर पानी भरा है और उसके बाद लगातार हाईवे के ऊपर कई जगहों पर ये पानी इस वक्त भरा हुआ है। आप हाईवे के ऊपर देख पाएंगे कि जो जल भराव है वो हुआ है, और यही एक वजह है कि इस जल भराव की वजह से इस हाईवे के ऊपर पूरा जाम लग चुका है। ये जो तस्वीरें आप देख रहे हैं ये राजीव चौक से हिरोंडा चौक होते हुए नरसिंहपुर और उसके बाद मानेसर की तरफ जाने वाला ये रास्ता है, और यहाँ पर आप जो है तस्वीरें देख पा रहे हैं किस कदर जाम लगा है। अब आपको मैं दूसरी तरफ की तस्वीरें दिखाता हूँ। ये तस्वीरें और देखिए आप, कितना लंबा जाम है, कई किलोमीटर लंबा ये जाम इस वक्त लग चुका है। और इसकी बड़ी वजह यही है कि हाईवे के ऊपर जो पानी है बारिश का वो आ चुका है। सर्विस रोड के ऊपर पहले पानी भरा, उसके बाद जो मेन हाईवे है उसके ऊपर आधे रास्ते के ऊपर पानी भरा हुआ है, और यही वजह है कि लंबा जाम इस वक्त लग चुका है। गुरुग्राम में कुछ देर की बारिश के बाद ही जाम के हालात इस कदर हो जाते हैं कि लोग कई घंटों तक गाड़ियों में ही कैद होकर रह जाते हैं। कुछ मिनटों का सफर कई घंटों के सफर में तब्दील हो जाता है, क्योंकि लगातार जब बारिश होती है गुरुग्राम में तो निचले इलाकों के साथ साथ हाईवे के ऊपर भी पानी भर जाता है। हालांकि प्रशासन हर बार ये दावा करता है कि अब की बार जब भी बारिश होगी तो जल भराव नहीं होगा, लेकिन बावजूद इसके हर बार की जो तस्वीर है कुछ ऐसी ही नजर आती है।
The European Union and the United States have agreed to a broad trade agreement that sets a 15% tariff on most European goods, including cars and pharmaceuticals. This potentially averts what could have become a painful trade war between two of the largest trading partners. Europe, in fact, happens to be America's single biggest source of imports.
It's a giant deal with lots of countries.
President Donald Trump said that the European Union had agreed to purchase $750 billion of American energy. Ursula von der Leyen, who is the president of the European Commission, has said that these imports of American energy would be spread out over the next 3 years. That happens to be the remainder of President Trump's term in office. The 27-member bloc has also agreed to increase its investments in the United States by more than $600 billion. Trump has said that the European Union would buy American military equipment. A senior US official speaking to the New York Times has said that those investments would include pharmaceuticals and automotives, on both of which there are separate levies. The two sides have also agreed to drop tariffs to zero on a range of goods, including aircraft, plane parts, chemicals, generic drugs, semiconductors, and some agricultural products.
Thank you very much. So we have good news. We've reached a deal. It's a good deal for everybody, I believe. And I think you were saying this is probably the biggest deal ever reached in any capacity, trade or beyond trade.
It is.
It's a giant deal with lots of countries.
Altogether, while it was clear that major details still need to be hammered out, the framework seemed likely to permanently reshape the trading relationship between two of the largest and most interconnected economies in the world. Trade between America and Europe was close to $1 trillion in 2024, with a bulk of imports, more than $600 billion, being imported from Europe into America. This trade agreement will help rebalance and also better enable trade on both sides. Not all higher tariffs have been eliminated, though. A senior American official has said that the 50% tariff that the Trump administration had imposed on steel and aluminum and copper globally, that is not part of the America-Europe deal. That will continue. European pharmaceuticals and semiconductor exports will be subject to a 15% tariff, regardless of what other tariffs the Trump administration ultimately levies on those industries. The Trump administration is currently preparing an investigation that will apply tariffs to pharmaceuticals and to semiconductors globally, but Europe will be kept out of it. Pharmaceuticals happen to be Europe's most important export to the United States, and those pending tariffs had become a serious obstacle in the trade talks between Brussels and Washington.
And agri-food, so the 0 for 0, does it include alcohol, spirits and wine?
No, there's no decision on that one. This is something which has to be sorted out in the next days.
Von der Leyen also said that no decision had been made yet on whether or not wine and spirits would be exempt. That is something that has to be sorted out in the next few days. Europe exported more than $8 billion of wine and spirits into America in 2024. Like many preliminary agreements which Trump has announced, this one too was sparse on details. For some of the deals that Trump has reached, whether it's with Indonesia or Vietnam, those other governments seem to lack clarity on what exactly they agreed to. It remains unclear which tariff rates will apply to which products starting the 1st of August. Nonetheless, the trade deal between America and Europe could bring a measure of calm to one of the world's most important economic relationships. It could also allay fears of an escalating trade war across the Atlantic. The European Union last year accounted for nearly $610 billion of the $3.3 trillion of goods that were imported by the United States. American exports to Europe were much lower at a little over $300 billion. The 15% tariff rate that is given to Europe mirrors the main tariff rate in the US-Japan trade agreement that was announced last week. It is also lower than the 19% and 20% rates that have been imposed on several Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia and Vietnam. America is also concerned about what it calls transshipment, where Chinese goods are rerouted through third countries, particularly in Asia, and then exported into the United States. This rate of 15% is also much higher than the tariffs which have been historically low. According to the World Trade Organization, before Donald Trump came into office, the trade-weighted tariff that America charged on foreign goods was 2.2%, while for the European Union, it was closer to 3%. Now it is on average 15%. The deal followed weeks of unpredictable talks and back and forth between negotiators of both sides. The Europeans believed they were close to a deal only for Trump to then send them a letter that he sent earlier in July, threatening a flat rate of 30% tariff on all European exports into America unless an agreement was reached by the 1st of August. This new deal may prevent any retaliatory tariffs and also avoid a tit-for-tat trade war that could have been economically damaging for both sides as well as for global markets. A trade conflict could also have further soured both the European Union and America's relationship, which already is strained. There are a number of issues, including military spending. Trump wants all European countries to raise their defense spending to above 2% of GDP. There's also support, particularly arms support for Ukraine, which had divided America and Europe. There are other issues like free speech and tech regulation, all of which had become problem areas. Markets across Asia and Europe reacted positively to the trade deal between Washington and Brussels, thereby easing concerns of any impending trade war starting next month.
Thank you.
One thing, though, remains to be seen. Trump is offering a differential tariff to partner countries like Japan, the European Union. Will he tariff Chinese goods at a much higher rate, thereby making Chinese imports into America much less competitive than importing from these partner countries? Ultimately, the entire objective of this painful tariff exercise is to rebalance global trade and make it a more level playing field, reducing the world's dependence on cheap, made-in-China goods. But we will not know the result of that until later this year to know whether or not there is a steep differential in these tariff rates between America's partner countries and China, or whether or not China's cheap labor and technological advancements continue to make Made in China globally popular. US President Donald Trump's tariff deadline is nearing. In the last few months, his administration has managed to strike trade deals with at least 4 or 5 different Southeast Asian countries and also with the European Union. The European Union is being charged at 15%, Japan at 15%, and Indonesia and Thailand at 19% and 20%. Just days before, a 30% tariff on the European Union imports was to be set to be kicked in, President Trump has announced a revised 15% tariff for all European imports into the United States. He's called this a good deal for everybody. China, on the other hand, still seems to be in negotiations with America. As of now, the US and Chinese officials have agreed to seek an extension of a 90-day tariff truce. Joining me now is Mr. Fred Fleitz. He's the vice chair of the America First Policy Institute, Center for American Security. Mr. Fleitz, President Trump has also gone down this road of tariffs against countries that the United States perceives that it's been trading for decades, but in an unfair kind of fashion, including trade with India, where India has, I think, about a $40 billion or so trade surplus with the United States. Why do you think that is? Whether it's Europe, whether it's Japan, South Korea, India, those countries which are America's partners, President Trump seems to think that they've been ripping off America as far as trade relationships are concerned, and therefore he wants to even it out. Why is that?
Well, Trump believes in trade that is free and is fair, and trade certainly isn't fair if America allows nations to export nations to our country and we don't have any tariffs, but when we try to send those same goods to another nation, there are high tariffs. This is something Trump finds unacceptable. He's also concerned that many nations, like China, have stolen U.S. manufacturing jobs with very high subsidies. I think it's clear some manufacturing jobs will not be returned to the United States for economic reasons, the fact that they're cheaper to make in other countries. But for Trump, it's very clear that free trade can't just be free, it has to be fair.
But this whole tariff war, which Trump has initiated, it's been launched by America against pretty much the entire world, including America's allies and partners and so on and so forth. But the real problem is China. Do you see at the end of this settling down that there is a tariff differential between what China exports to the US market as opposed to some of these partner countries, allied countries, Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, India, etc., South Korea? There has to be a trade differential because otherwise it defeats the purpose of having these tariffs in the first place.
Well, China is a real problem because it is exploiting global trade, it is stealing intellectual property, and I think that Trump is trying to send the message that nations can get a better trade relationship by working with the United States than with working with China. We know why so many industries are moving out of China, because it is a communist state that is taking away the rights of the people, that is not engaging in free and fair trade practices. I tell you, so many people in America are very pleased that India pulled out of the BRICS arrangement, which we didn't think was in the interests of India. So I think Trump has a pretty good plan here. He wants to confront the Chinese, but he wants to promote good relations, but also make the message that dealing with the U.S. is a better deal for the world than dealing with China.
Ms. Trump, the president, has also said that he would end all wars within the first 100 days in office. He's been in office now 6 months. The ceasefire is elusive in Ukraine and Russia, the war that's happening there. It's elusive in the Israel-Hamas war that's happening out in Gaza. So where does that leave President Trump and all the promises that he seems to have made over the last 6 months or so?
Well, first of all, peacemaking is hard, and Trump inherited two very difficult wars that he's tried to solve. There's nothing in common between Trump's policy on Ukraine and Biden's. Biden made no effort whatsoever to begin negotiations, to talk to the Russians, to encourage the Ukrainians and the Russians to talk. There have been exchanges of prisoners. I think the fact that there is ongoing negotiations is a small positive sign. Trump did change his policy recently because the Russians were basically taking advantage of him. But the difference is we'll be sending weapons to the Russians that will be bought by NATO to be provided to Ukraine. That keeps Trump, by that, Trump keeps his promise that Europe should take primary responsibility for defending Europe and for the war in Ukraine. It is not similar at all with what Biden was doing, which had no policy outcome or possible accomplishment. The war in Gaza is very difficult because we have a radical Islamist terrorist group, Hamas, that is so hateful it doesn't seem interested in negotiating good faith either to end the war or to protect its people. And I think everything has been tried so far to try to get a deal. The negotiations recently broke down. My hope is that Egypt and Qatar and other nations can lean on Hamas to make it clear that time is running out for them ever to negotiate a deal. But I don't think Trump is going to give up.
All right, Mr. Flights, well, thank you very much for joining us here on CNN News 18. Thank you for your time and your thoughts and perspective. Thank you.
No.
The resurgence of hostilities along the Thailand-Cambodia border has drawn global attention. It's taking a massive humanitarian toll and it's adding to regional instability. But it's also appearing to deepen a proxy war between the United States and China in Southeast Asia. While both Thailand and Cambodia have local disputes which are rooted in a very entangled history, their respective security alignments and their economic dependencies and their patterns of foreign military support reveal a broader geostrategic struggle that is ravaging the Mekong Delta. Tensions escalated this past week along the contentious border, particularly near the Priya Vihar temple. The spark for the recent violence has been a series of incidents that happened between May and July, including the use of landmines, rocket attacks, and the death of soldiers and civilians. Each side has blamed the other for starting the hostilities, but this time around, it has fast turned into the most severe border confrontation in over a decade. In fact, Thailand's dramatic move to deploy US-supplied F-16s in live combat, destroying military targets in Cambodia, signaled a drastic escalation. Both states quickly expelled each other's diplomats, they closed border crossings, they brought their respective armed forces to high alert. And so much so that Donald Trump had to intervene and force both sides to get into ceasefire talks, the first day of which began in Malaysia on Monday. Now, here are some reasons why this is not just a localized dispute, but a proxy war between two great powers, America and China. Cambodia's transformation into a key client state of China is beyond dispute. China is by far Cambodia's largest investor, trade partner, and even donor. Infrastructure, transport, energy, and construction projects in Cambodia are now overwhelmingly financed by China and Chinese interests. Some estimates suggest that nearly a third of all annual foreign investment that comes into Cambodia comes from China. Chinese capital is behind the high-profile developments, whether it is in Phnom Penh or whether it is some of these modern port expansions. China's influence is also particularly pronounced in the military domain. In the past decade, Cambodia has received hundreds of millions of dollars in Chinese military aid, grants, as well as Chinese armament and material support. There is also direct training of Cambodian troops by Chinese PLA officers. The Chinese-backed modernization of Cambodia's Ream naval base, located strategically on the Gulf of Thailand, signals Beijing's intent to create a military footprint for China in the lower side, in the south side of the South China Sea. Cambodia officially denies that this Ream naval base is a permanent foreign military presence, but joint exercises like the Golden Dragon 2024, involving thousands of Chinese and Cambodian troops, have introduced new-age Chinese military technology and reinforced interoperability. Chinese equipment and doctrines are now deeply ingrained in Cambodia's armed forces, and that has raised concerns about Phnom Penh's lack of independence during this ongoing war. Thailand, on the other hand, is part of one of the oldest US alliances in Asia. Since the 1954 Manila Pact and its designation as a major non-NATO ally in 2003, Thailand has received sustained military assistance, equipment, and high-level training from the United States. There's also joint operations like the annual Cobra Gold exercise, which involves extensive US arms exports and support to Thailand, and that has provided Bangkok with some of the most modern armament in the region. Despite deep security ties with Washington, Thailand, though, pursues a balanced foreign policy. It seeks to avoid outright alignment in the America-China rivalry. It continues military cooperation with America while maintaining significant economic ties with China. However, the recent deployment of US-supplied F-16 fighter jets in active operations against a Chinese-armed neighbor underlines the inherent risk of escalation. In moments of crisis like the recent war, this could tilt the region into being pawns in the great power competition between America and China. Now, if you were to compare the military strength of Cambodia and Thailand, whether it is manpower, organizational category, active personnel, for example, the Cambodian army has anywhere between 125,000 to 200,000, whereas the Thai army has more than 350,000 active personnel. Same goes for paramilitary forces. Cambodia has around 10,000, Thailand more than twice of that. The defense budget, as of 2024, Cambodia's defense budget is just a little over $1 billion. Thailand's is more than 5 times that at $5.73 billion. Main battle tanks, armored vehicles. Thailand maintains a much larger, much better funded and more technologically advanced military. Its forces are complemented by a substantial conscription system. It has a large number of reserves, and it has access to American logistics and training. Cambodia's military is smaller, it's comparatively under-resourced, though it's been buttressed recently by Chinese grants and training. Cambodia's arsenal is increasingly Chinese, whether it is small arms to rocket artillery or air defense systems. Its greatest numerical edge happens to be in mobile rocket launchers, which it uses to leverage long-range strikes across this contested border. However, Cambodia lacks a strong air force. Its capabilities are severely outmatched by the Thai Air Force. Thailand, on the other hand, wields an extensive fleet of American fighter jets, including the F-16 Falcons, in addition to Black Hawk helicopters and NATO-provided logistics and surveillance technologies. This air power advantage has already been demonstrated in the ongoing border hostilities between Cambodia and Thailand. In fact, Thai airstrikes deep inside Cambodia have been enabled because of these F-16s in live sorties. The border conflict, while it is rooted in historical grievances and nationalist fervor on both sides of this disputed border, it has acquired a geostrategic meaning and significance. Military analysts are now pointing to the deep risk in further escalation that could drag both Beijing and Washington into this Mekong conflict, either directly or by proxy, making the Mekong Delta a microcosm of great power competition.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Saying, should Congress ruling at the time and leading the charge of saffron terror as if it was established not take political accountability and responsibility for the fact that none of these cases have been proved?
Jai Hind, Shivani, at the very outset, I must say justice delayed is justice denied, as we all know. And since you have used the term saffron terror, the famous person who coined that term, actually, who was the Union Home Secretary at the point till 2013, later on joined the BJP and became a BJP MP and was a minister, a cabinet minister in the BJP government from 2019 to 2024. So let me just tell you that that is exactly the root cause of where we are standing today. This judgment, which is full of conjectures, rather I would say it is an oxymoron of a verdict. Why, I'll tell you. Because the judge has categorically written, and she writes that he or she, I'm not very clear, strong suspicion against accused but not enough to punish them. Hence, benefit of doubt. So both in a single breath, if you can say strong suspicion against the accused, but benefit of doubt is to be given. And now let me take you.
But that's how verdicts are given. They have said that there is not enough conclusive
Shivani, allow me my
proof.
fair opportunity. You have asked me a question. Please have the patience to hear me out. I have some very intriguing points that I'm about to bring up. You know, the public prosecutor in this matter, Shivani, who was taking up this matter, Rohini Salyan, actually submitted on record in 2015 that she was asked by the NIA to slow down and go soft on the accused. You have yourself in your report told us, and later on, by the way, Rohini Salyan was pushed out of this entire prosecution in 2017. In spite of the fact that she represented one of the victims who came up to the Supreme Court because the justice was getting delayed arbitrarily, and she came and they were able to represent successfully. They were able to bring on record a lot of crucial evidence. And then 2007, she was pushed out of the thing. And you have yourself brought it on record that only 93, the court says 93 or 94 were actually injured, when on record it is 104, 101. Let me also remind you, Shivani, that actually, 32 victims have gone hostile. 32 witnesses have gone hostile.
Yes.
39 witnesses have turned hostile, out of which 6 had actually submitted their statements before that. 30 witnesses have died, Shivani. So you see, what kind of a prosecution are we looking at? That is the central question of this debate.
Yeah, but the
today.
investigation has also been called out. You are talking about the prosecution that started, as most cases in India, much, much later. Almost takes 10 years before trial begins. But you're not talking about the investigation. The investigation happened when the UPA was in power, right? Why was the investigation botched up?
So Shivani, first of all, thank you so much. You basically underlined the point that this sort of judgments are actually an outcome of the lethargic judicial system that we have, where the judicial appointments are held back, where the judicial entrance examinations are not successfully conducted, and for the last 11 years...
But that's not unique to this case. What's unique to this case? Mahima Singh, I asked you a question on saffron terror. I've given you enough time to talk about the details of this case. But you're saying that one of the people who was in your dispensation at the time, now with the BJP, coined the term. It's not like the Congress didn't run with it. It's not like your ministers didn't talk about it all the time. It's not like P. Chidambaram didn't justify the coinage of the term saffron terror as the Home Minister to say that no, we need to drive home the point that these are right-wing fundamentalist organizations.
Shivani, before you go on to build that narrative, let me just...
It's not a narrative, it's facts.
Yeah, it is. It is very much a narrative.
No, it's not a narrative, it's facts. I have quoted facts that Chidambaram has talked about saffron terror being a justified term.
Since as far as I know, Shivani, you see the art of questioning, you are a very seasoned journalist. So I believe after a question and answer, an uninterrupted one must follow.
No,
Whereas,
don't call my questions narrative. I'm sorry, I take objection to that. I have not built any narrative. If there was ever a narrative that was built, it is on saffron terror. It is on its last legs if it is still surviving. My question is, shouldn't the political dispensation of the time take responsibility for their fact that they tried to malign a peaceful community and peaceful religion?
Not at all. Not at all, Shivani. That is the narrative that you're building, and we can see.
It's not a narrative.
Now, it is very much a narrative, and saffron terror was quite.
Viewers, mark my words, Hindus can never be terrorists. It may sound like a slogan, but it rings very, very true. Especially today, viewers, especially today on a day like today. A special NIA court in Mumbai has broken the back of a long-running politico-legal conspiracy, one that sought to link Sanatan Dharma with terrorism, viewers, Hinduism with terrorism, viewers, saffron with terrorism, viewers, with the exoneration